I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Rick Smith and Bruce Lurie this evening, the authors of Toxin Toxout. I finished the book this weekend. It's a great read if you haven't already picked it up and read it yourself. We're really proud to be a part of helping to launch this because the research in the book really supports what the Big Carrot has been touting or preaching sometimes the last 30 years. Often with the media or skeptics of things like organic food or paraben-free cosmetics, the argument was that there wasn't a lot of research to back up why it was important to have these products or buy these things or support these industries. And so the research is starting to surface and people are starting to do more of it, but a lot of it is in this book and it's really, really beneficial. Besides the common sense argument that eating organic is probably better for you, there's some really great research in the book that will help people to educate people so that we can understand why we make these choices and also help to educate other people about why they might want to make some of those changes in their life as well. So this evening what we're going to do is we're going to have, I don't know, I guess we'll see how it goes. I've heard these guys speak before. They're very humorous and really great to listen to, so I don't know how long we'll be here, but I'm sure you have
4 hours.
We're going to lock you in, and so they'll tell us some of the insights into some of the things that they did to make this book happen, I'm sure, and some of the stories, but we'll leave lots of time for questions from you as well at the end. So without further ado, oh, and I guess one last thing, if you haven't already picked up the book, today it's on sale for 15% off downstairs, and we will likely be done before the store closes, so if you want to run down and grab one. We'll also have copies on hand for a long time, as well as their first book, Slow Death by Rubber Duck. So please join me in welcoming Rick and Bruce.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you very much for joining us. Rick can say a few more words about specifically how great Big Carrot has been to our research and our work. But I just generally wanted to welcome you, and if a chia seed comes flying out of my mouth, just going to warn you now, I'm drinking a wonderful chia drink. So Rick and I wrote Slow Death by Rubber Duck a few years ago, and happily it did very well in many different countries and very well in Canada. And as we were traveling around the world talking about Slow Death by Rubber Duck, which really is the story of how chemicals are all around us and everything from our cosmetics to kids' toys to our sofas and frying pans, and how those chemicals end up in our bodies and what the health effects of those chemicals are in our bodies. So everything from endocrine disruption to cancer to autism, ADHD, thyroid problems, a whole range of health issues associated with chemicals. And wherever we traveled, someone would always say to us, so, and I should mention, we'll talk more about this with this book, but both of the books use experimentation as a way to tell the story. So in this book, we did a lot of experiments where we were able to demonstrate that all of the chemicals in these products end up in our bodies just going through the daily process of using them. So invariably someone would stand up somewhere and say to you guys, so you saw all these chemicals going into your body, what did you do to get them out? And that wasn't something that Rick and I really contemplated. So that's the setting for Toxin Toxout. How do you get these chemicals out of our bodies? And so we concocted a bunch of experiments to see, first off, are there things we can do to avoid these chemicals? And then second, because we know we can't avoid all of them, are there things we can do to help our bodies detox naturally? And that's in essence what Toxin Toxout is about. So we'll take it from there.
It's a particular pleasure to be at the Carrot today talking about this because the Carrot figures prominently in the book. One of the chapters is about organic food, and a number of the chapters focus on how to avoid getting these chemicals into your body in the first place. So before we start talking about detox, before we start talking about the relative merits of these various cleanses and other things on the market, the first question we deal with in the book is how do we avoid getting these chemicals into our body in the first place? And as Bruce mentioned, we tried to, in Toxin Toxout, as we did in our first book, structure a series of experiments to replicate everyday life, and then measure levels of certain toxic chemicals in the bodies of our test victims before and after doing certain things. So in one chapter we looked at cosmetics and personal care products, and we asked the question: does the use of greener products result in, many of which are on sale downstairs, does the use of greener products result in measurably lower levels of parabens and phthalates in the body? And we actually we used 2 volunteers for that experiment, Ray Chabello, who runs Aveda in Canada, and a friend of ours who's a professional makeup artist in New York City, who's very interested in cosmetics, but is mostly interested in how effective certain cosmetic products are, because she's a professional makeup artist. So kind of the first and only question she's interested in is, does the mascara run on camera or not? So these 2 folks did this experiment for the book, used certain products, conventional brands for a few days, and then greener brands, non-toxic brands for a few days. And the reduction in paraben and phthalate levels in their body was incredible, an order of magnitude on those days when they were using greener products. We looked at the new car smell in the book, because one of the ways, of course, you can absorb chemicals into your body is through what you breathe. So we'd always been curious about the new car smell and the extent to which the simple act of breathing can result in these chemicals accumulating in the body. And so we did this experiment where I sat in a car for 8 hours breathing in the new car smell, and then tested for certain kinds of volatile organic chemicals, formaldehyde, benzene, before and after the experiment, and lo and behold, there was a dramatic effect. The last experiment I'll tell you about started here at the Big Carrot. The chapter starts off at the Big Carrot. The Big Carrot very graciously provided the organic food for the experiment. And we asked the simple question, does eating organic food result in measurably lower levels of chemicals in the human body? And Bruce and I for years have eaten organic food, but kind of on a wing and a prayer. Like, we always sort of assumed that it was better for the environment, because obviously you don't, by definition, the growing of organic food does not result in pesticides being pumped out into the environment. But we hadn't seen any good experiments trying to get at the question of whether the eating of organic food measurably reduces levels of chemicals in the human body. So that's what we tried. That's what we set out to do.
Just chewing my organic chia seeds.
Very good. So we took 9 kids, 9 volunteers. So we actually, some of them live around here. We Facebooked a call for volunteers, and the question we asked on our Facebook page was, seeking families to volunteer for this experiment who don't currently eat organic food, but who are willing to try. And so what we did is we took 9 kids, 5 families, structured a 12-day experiment. So for the first 4 days of the experiment, the families ate conventional food. For the second 4 days, the Big Carrot rushed them a shipment of organic food. And then for the last 4 days, they went back on their non-organic, non-Big Carrot diet. And then we measured levels of pesticides in the urine every morning. And the results, you have to buy the book for the full effect. But on page 82 of the book, you will find an astonishing graph that shows that on those days when they ate organic food, levels of cancer-causing pesticides fell in the bodies of those 9 kids by over 2/3. And then as soon as they went back on their non-big carrot diet, those levels came right back up again. So not only was there a very dramatic decrease, but it was a very rapid decrease. So the eating of organic food starts to reduce pesticide levels in the body within a matter of hours.
Oh, yes.
With this experiment, did you notice or did they say anything about how they felt after the 4 days of eating the organic and then going back? Did they notice a difference in their mood or anything like that?
We didn't administer. I mean, frankly, it was an incredible. These were 5 families that volunteered for this, and so you can imagine these parents. They had to collect urine from their kids every morning for 12 days. That was about as much as we asked them to do. We didn't administer a quiz. What comments we got back anecdotally from them were pretty funny. I mean, these are families that have never really eaten organic food before, so the organic Cheerio, with apologies to the big carrot, apparently the organic Cheerios were a lot harder than normal Cheerios. The kids had a lot of complaints.
They always do.
So that's your buddy.
So in terms of the experiment, was it like identical foods, like fruits and vegetables, or was it just?
No, so we didn't control their. So on the non-organic parts of the experiment, we didn't control what they ate at all.
Oh, okay.
So they just ate what they normally ate.
Junk food, whatever.
Delicious Doritos, I'm sure. Whatever. For the 4 days of the organic phase of the experiment, we did control what they ate, and the carrot was incredibly good. I mean, we replaced their diet soup to nuts, literally, like right down to organic vegetable oil, organic spices, but on the first and third parts of the experiment, when they were eating non-organic, we didn't control what they ate. We didn't have to. As long as it was non-organic, we didn't care.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there was apparently a study recently that said that they had looked at organic food and 45% of it had pesticide residue on it, in it, or whatever.
Yep.
They didn't say the degree to which it had, because it can happen in many ways, right? It could just be transshipment or, there's various ways it could be contaminated. But did that factor in at all to anything here?
Yeah, well, it's they do these studies every once in a while, and there's often 2 kinds of studies that try to suggest organic food is not necessarily of the value that we would put on it, and there are the ones like the one that the CBC did, which was showing they just got a bunch of food and showed there's pesticides on organic food. Well, of course there's pesticides on organic food. There's pesticides on your clothes. There's pesticides on your car. There's pesticides are everywhere.
Yeah.
In water, in the water they use to irrigate. You can't avoid it. It's in the atmosphere. So much of that is just kind of inadvertent pesticide exposure because pesticides are everywhere. I think in a couple of cases there might have been some questionable pesticide use, or maybe a farm next door blew over or something. Who knows? But still, they were very minimum levels of pesticides. So if you're buying organic food, you're essentially reducing 99% of the pesticides you're going to be exposed to. And then some of them, there was that Stanford one that drove us nuts, which tried to say organic food is of no benefit because it's the same nutritional value. Well, broccoli's kind of broccoli. Either it's got pesticides or it doesn't have pesticides. Biologically, it's not really different if it's organic or inorganic. We would argue that there's other benefits to it, but most people are buying organic food because it's got lower pesticides, not because they think it's got more potassium. Yeah, so as Rick said, there are things that we can do to avoid the exposure to these chemicals, and some of that's making different choices about the products we use or the food we eat. And as I said at the outset, there are still chemicals everywhere around us. So what we wanted to try to figure out in this book is whether or not there are things that we can be doing in our daily routines that actually help remove toxic chemicals from our bodies. And there's sort of a couple of ways that we looked at that, and again we did a couple of experiments. In fact, we spoke quite at length to a fellow earlier this evening downstairs who had high levels of various chemicals and heavy metals in his body, and had been undergoing a bunch of therapies. And one of the ones that he was undergoing, which we did an experiment on in the book, is called chelation therapy. And that's very particular to people who are diagnosed with heavy metal poisoning. So it's not something that the average person is going to do, but more and more there are people that have, you know, high levels of mercury or high levels of lead or aluminum, but particularly mercury, which is very problematic. And so chelation therapy is a well-proven method for removing mercury from your body. And so we did an experiment, and it's much more invasive too. You want to have a medical supervision, but basically it's a solution, a chemical solution that's run through your body through IV, and that solution basically picks up the heavy metals in your body and you eliminate them. And so it's, anyway, so I did that, just, you know, a day of no chelation and measuring the metals in my body, and then a day of chelation, and it was quite dramatic. Just in the one chelation session that I went through, you know, you saw you know, a many times fold increase in the mercury and lead and aluminum and other things leaving my body. And so it's the kind of thing that, you know, again, if you're diagnosed with high levels of heavy metals, you can do this kind of treatment, and you have to do it quite extensively, you know, like a chelation treatment a week, say for 6 months or even a year, just to eliminate them from your body. But we wanted to show that there are things out there that you can do. Something that's a little less invasive, and it can be more enjoyable, although my experience wasn't entirely enjoyable in the book, is sauna therapy. And more detox physicians and detox nutritionists are turning to saunas as an easy way to eliminate toxins from your body. And you know, as Rick said, we you know, we knew from the first book and things like the car experiment that you're inhaling chemicals when we breathe, you're consuming chemicals through your food or in water, and you're absorbing chemicals through your skin when you're using different kinds of, you know, body products. It didn't really occur to me until doing the research on the book that our bodies actually remove chemicals in all of those same ways. So we actually exhale chemicals, we sweat out chemicals, and so the sauna experiment was interesting because there are certain chemicals, it turns out, and bisphenol A, which is the plastic we talked about in the first book that's in the baby bottles, it turns out that BPA is more readily sweat out of your body than comes out in, say, through your urine. So that means that your body is actually differentially eliminating chemicals through different mechanisms. So what you want to do is maximize all the ways that your body naturally detoxes, and our bodies are designed to detox, but you need to help your body's own detox mechanisms. And so sweating, turns out, you know, was a good way of eliminating chemicals.
Until you fainted.
Yeah. I kind of overdid the sauna therapy.
Bruce kind of overdid that.
Got dehydrated and passed out. So you got to be careful when you're doing this.
There's nothing we won't do in the service of science.
As they say, don't do this at home. Where was I? So there are a whole other group of things. Like there's the cleanses, which some of which, you know, our basic theory and reading the evidence on it is that, you know, a one-off kind of 5-day cleanse diet isn't going to remove a whole lot of toxic chemicals. It may make you feel a little better over that period. It may have other health benefits, but really what you need to be doing is shifting more to a detox lifestyle. So if you're consuming, you know, crappy food, 11 and a half months of the year, and then you decide you're going to do a broccoli blender diet for 5 days, you're not gonna suddenly be, all, suddenly be all detox. What you want to do is be eating organic food on a daily basis, drinking more water. It's all the stuff that any doctor is going to tell you to be healthy, right? It's more exercise, more vegetables, more fruits, more water, less meat, less fatty products, and we go into the book a little bit in the whole relationship between fat and toxins, and this idea that you want to reduce fat both in the food you're eating and your own body fat, because that's where most of the toxic chemicals are stored. And then, do you maybe talk a bit about the very end of the book?
Yeah, sure. So the book, most of the book is focused on what we can do as consumers, and of course, the big carrot was a real pioneer in this respect. The notion that you can, through buying better products, avoid, to a certain extent, toxic chemicals in your body is a big step forward. But ultimately, as we conclude in the book, we shouldn't have to. It's ludicrous that we should be worried about these chemicals in the first place, or that we should be put in that position. And so very clearly, we need better regulations, we need better laws in our country to protect kids and to protect adults from some of these inadequately tested, clearly dangerous chemicals that are used in everyday life. If you actually compare the protection, if you look at the protection that Canadians have at the moment versus the protection that Europeans have, the protection that folks in the States have in many places, we are less protected when it comes to pesticides. We're less protected when it comes to things like phthalates that are in personal care products in Canada, not so much elsewhere, very strongly linked to prostate cancer. Europe has stronger laws on chemicals in cosmetics that we absorb through our bodies because we slather them on ourselves on a daily basis. Parabens, of course, very strongly linked to breast cancer. So, our conclusion in the book is that it's high time that Canadians receive the same level of protection as Europeans have, as Americans have, and we need to push our governments to do better. As opposed to some other issues, this is largely a federal government responsibility. So when it comes to pesticide laws, cosmetics laws, all these different products that we surround ourselves with each day, this is primarily a federal government responsibility, and we need to push people to do better. The last thing I'll say is that we get asked this question a lot. Bruce and I think, are no longer invited to certain dinner parties because people are kind of wary of our party pooperism. I've noticed, the fact that we've written 2 books on this now sort of sets up this weird sort of confessional relationship. Like, we'll have people come up to us when we speak and say things like, "Look, I really buy what you're saying, but I had to use Tresemme shampoo last night, and I'm really sorry. but like, it was all I had. I just heard from you that it's a problem. I didn't know." Some folks are under the impression that our books are kind of a downer or pessimistic, and far from it. We actually we point out. It's been interesting for us to compare the reception to our first book and the discussions we had in 2009 versus now. And public awareness of these issues is much higher now than it was 3 or 4 years ago. People know what parabens are, people know what phthalates are. People are looking for those on their product labels to try to avoid them. So we're actually very optimistic that this issue is actually moving in the right direction. As a result of the great work of organizations like the Big Carrot. So maybe we'll leave it there, and if there's, we already started getting to the questions, we're very happy to you know, if you have any confessions for us this evening, you know, we're happy to oblige.